My name is Shawn Forde. That is ShawnKareem as in David E.
Good afternoon, Mr. Forde.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Forde, first, just to get this on the record, please tell the members of the jury how tall you are.
Approximately 6'4", 6 foot 4 inches.
All right, and how much did you weigh, if you recall, in May of 2017?
That's a good question. I'd probably say maybe 295, maybe 3,
All right.
maybe 2, between 275 and 295, something like that.
Is that lighter or heavier than it is now?
It's probably heavier than what I am now.
Close to 300 pounds.
Yeah.
By way of background, sir, where were you born?
Brooklyn, New York.
Did you grow up in Brooklyn?
I did.
Did you go to high school in Brooklyn?
I did.
And then what did you do after high school?
I joined the military.
Which branch?
The Marine Corps.
Why'd you pick the Marine Corps?
According to them and every other branch, they were the toughest. So I wanted to find out.
And where did the Marine Corps send you?
God, a lot of places, to include the combat zone 4 times.
4 times?
Yes.
I think yesterday in the opening statement I said 3, so I apologize. What part of the war?
Iraq twice, Afghanistan once, Saudi Arabia once.
And how many years did you serve as a Marine?
Just shy of 19 years.
And then you ended up here in Portland, Oregon. How did that happen?
Oh gosh, it's a longer story than y'all got time. But short story is, I was being put out for medical. I just had knee surgery, and they deemed my knee to be unserviceable or something along those lines. So they were putting me out, and at the time I was married, so I followed my wife at the time. She got a job here, and we came. Couldn't afford my duty station. I was in Hawaii, so I couldn't afford that anymore. So yeah.
All right. And how many years ago was that when you came to Portland?
That was 2014, so 5.5 years.
What's your occupation now?
I run a program at Portland Community College, Cascade campus, for first year and for first year college students, but students transitioning from high school to college.
And is this for any student or students that are at risk?
Yeah, so it's focused on students of color, students with disabilities, first generation students, and students of low income.
All right. And is that the work you were doing back in May of 2017?
No, it was not. I was a full-time student at Portland Community College, I'm pretty sure.
At that time? Right.
About to graduate, yes.
Let me direct your attention then to the date in question here in this courtroom, which is May 26, 2017. Was that a regular work day for you or a school day?
Yeah. I mean, essentially it was. Yeah, I was just on my way home after a long day, and I'd stopped off at Transition Projects because I volunteered there as well, and I was on my way home to drop my books and head off to another meeting.
All right. And let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 96. And it's a little fuzzy, but let me know if you recognize yourself in this photograph.
I do.
All right. And does this appear to be where you boarded the MAX at, I believe, Southwest 6th and Pine?
6th and Hoyt, I think it is.
Or 6th and
Oak.
I think Pine is further down. I think Hoyt is the one with right where the train station is, the Greyhound.
Oh, right, okay.
So
Is that where you
61.
boarded the Max?
That is where I boarded the Max.
All right. So, Your Honor, the state will offer Exhibit 96.
No objection.
96 is admitted. By chance, do you know if you're going to be going over 100 exhibits?
I'm told not yet,
Okay.
but is there something you want us to do, Your Honor?
Well, the census exhibits start at 101, so if you are, then just let us know so we can rearrange for different numbering systems.
Okay, thank you, Judge. It all been on that, your clerk will know as well. So, Mr. Forde, can you tell us what you were seeing in State's Exhibit 96?
That looks like me about to board the train, and I was holding the door so that others could get on first.
Did you recall seeing a teenage African-American girl and another teenage girl who was wearing a hijab?
I do. I held it specifically for them toward the end because they were running towards it.
This is marked as State's Exhibit 93.
And do you recognize, sir, this seat?
Yes, I do.
What does this show?
This shows where I was positioned initially, and where the two young ladies were seated when we boarded the train.
State submits Exhibit 93.
Yeah, I just have a quick. No objection.
Okay, 93 is admitted.
And, sir, we're looking now at State's Exhibit 93. And when you say the two young ladies, are those the same teenagers, African-American or African, one in a hijab, who got on board the Max as you held the door open for them and then took their seat?
That's correct.
All right. And is that you standing in the background in the white shirt?
Yes, that is me off to the right.
All right. And how frequently in that time frame did you ride the Max train?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
Back and forth?
Yes.
All right. And you're standing in the picture. Was that your custom or practice to stand up?
Yeah, that's kind of like, I guess, a military thing. We got used to standing a lot, unfortunately.
I'm guessing you probably don't fit very well in those little seats on the Max either, do you?
Not the ones in the center at the time. No, not the ones in the center. No.
All right. Now, at this point, as you began your journey east, was there anything unusual at all about this afternoon on the Max train?
No, not at that point. No.
And what was your destination that day? Which stop?
I was on my way to 60th Avenue. 60th Avenue.
So Northeast 60th?
Northeast
Is that right?
60th, correct.
And is that east on the line of the Hollywood stop?
Yes. It's the very next stop.
Very next stop, all right. This is State's Exhibit number 45.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
What does this show?
This shows me watching people board, to include Christian, watching people board the train.
State offers State's Exhibit 45.
No objection.
45 is admitted.
And, sir, when you say Christian, do you mean the defendant charged in this case, Jeremy Christian?
I do.
And do you see him in court this afternoon?
I do.
And where is he?
He's the human right over there in the dead center of the table to the right.
Now, in this photo, it shows the defendant entering Max, which was taken at the Rose Quarter stop. Did you take any immediate notice of Mr. Christian at that time?
No, he was just like everybody else, just boarding the train.
All right. And in that photo, it's hard to see because there's a piece of darkened glass or plexiglass in a panel both next to you and then on the opposite side. But are those two teenagers who previously have been identified as Walio, Mohamed, and Destinee Mangum still seated there?
Yes, they are.
At some point, as the train continued east on the Green Line, did you notice Mr. Christian doing something?
Yes, I mean, I had my, there was a point where I had my my earbuds in and I was listening to music, but I don't listen to it loud enough to where I can't hear people because, you know, well, I'm in the whitest city in the whitest state, so I'm aware of people maybe saying something to me that they think I can't hear. So I could hear someone yelling, and you know, me being from New York, I'm used to people acting a little bit extra on the train. They were yelling stuff about, like, you know, cutting throats and cutting heads. So I pulled one earbud out, and I could hear it clearly being yelled. And that's when I looked at the young ladies first, who at first, you know, they were just kind of enjoying their ride. And at this point, they were kind of just like either looking the other way or looking down. And their entire demeanor had changed. And so I didn't think at the time that it was directed at them, but when I looked over and I saw the defendant, he was yelling directly at them.
How could you tell? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
how
please.
could you tell that he was talking directly at Walio, Mohamed, and Destinee Mangum?
Because he was looking right at him when he was yelling. He was looking right at him and talking about Christians kill Muslims, and the only person at the time wearing anything resembling a Muslim was one of the young ladies. But he was looking directly at him when he was talking about cutting their heads off and slicing their throats.
Right. And that distance from where he was seated to the girls had been measured at 12 feet. Does that sound about right?
Sure. Sounds about right.
So what happened after that?
I changed my, my space where I was in the train to try and, I guess shield them from him, and maybe take some of whatever he was dishing out, and just kind of get him to kind of focus on me rather than focus on these two young girls. They look really young, they look, I'm a dad, so they look young enough. And you can tell by their reaction, they were totally like out of, they were out of their sorts. Like they were really like scared. And so I just wanted him to focus on me. That's it. That's all I could think of was I didn't want him to focus on them anymore and continue threatening them.
And so did you physically move from where you were standing?
I did.
Where did you move to?
I moved to that area close to the area where you see him entering, and I just held on to the bar. But I tried to stand like where I was, kind of blocking them, or I felt like I was blocking them, and so that he could just focus on me.
Right. During that time, was the defendant, Jeremy Christian, still making comments?
Absolutely.
Do you remember the words he was saying?
it was a whole lot of the rhetoric of Christians kill Muslims, we chop their heads off, we cut their throats, get out of my country, go back to your country. Yeah, just mostly that.
What did you make of that, of the content of what he was saying? And by content, I mean the meaning of the content.
It was, he was right there on the cusp. He hadn't, used the N-word, at that point, but, or he hadn't used the N-word at all, and not that I heard, but I was waiting for that. Like, he was moving in that direction where it was just really, just white supremacist rhetoric,
And the train is moving east as he continues to say these things. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And what happens then?
I think there was a point where when I, kind of like interjected and started, stood in between them. All I was saying to him was like, hey, look, man, it's Friday. Ain't nobody trying to hear all of that, just stop, And so, he told me to F off and, freedom of speech and, it's his country, get out of his country if I don't like it. And so I remember looking at, kind of touching my hat or something like that, because I always wore a black Marine Corps hat with a Marine Corps emblem on it at the time. And I remember touching my hat and last time I checked, I probably got more right to this country than you do. I've done more for it probably in a year than you've done your entire life.
Did you think that to yourself, or did you say that to him?
I'm pretty sure I said that, somewhere in our back and forth. And because he kept, with the get out of my country, freedom of speech. And I remember at one point he jumped up and he jumped up from his seat and he was basically like, do something, right, to me. And so, I'm used to people trying to bait me. I didn't grow up in, somewhere where I didn't have a lot of confrontation. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, so I was used to it.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Go for it.
Yesterday the defense attorney said do something was a warning. Is that a warning or a challenge?
Oh, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I know that if I would have stepped forward and engaged with him, we would have just engaged. But like I said, I'm used to being baited. So if he was not willing to come into my space, because I don't know him from Adam, I just some random person challenging me on the train. I'm not going to go into your comfort zone. So I just stared at him while he said that, and then he waited a little while, and then he sat back down.
So you didn't accept his challenge?
No.
Yeah. Well, at that point, you're in your early 40s? 40?
Yeah, I was probably 40 or 41 or something along those lines. Yeah.
With kids?
Yes.
You're not going to get into a fight with this guy?
Yeah, I got more important things to do than to figure out who's tougher between me and some knucklehead on the train.
All right, so what happened after that?
So I think at that point when he jumped up and he was like, do something, I think the young ladies assumed that something was about to happen. So they got up from where they were seated and they went up to the upper deck area behind me. I remember a young man, Micah. He comes down shortly after that. I'm assuming he sees them distraught. He comes down and he's like, "Hey, you don't talk to young ladies that way," or something along those lines. But he was like, he was coming from my back, and I remember just like stopping him and saying, "Hey, it's all right. He's just talking right now. He's just talking. It's cool. He's just talking." And so there's a whole bunch of back and forth between the defendant and me, the defendant and Micah, and at this point, like there are multiple people on the train now just getting tired of the rhetoric. The defendant is saying that he's a Viking, which is more white supremacist rhetoric, in case y'all don't know. Yeah, that Vikings.
I'm sorry, sir. Just Your Honor, I know you've admonished Mr. Christian from not speaking, and he just made a comment, so I asked the court to admonish him.
Okay, this applies to any witness as well as Mr. Christian. Make sure that you do not make audible noises or comments. So no sighing or gasping, anything like that. And if you do persist in doing so, I've talked to you about the consequences of that.
Understood. Thank you, Your Honor. All right, I apologize for
No worries.
interrupting you, and I believe rhetoric, and you were just saying about sort of the rhetoric that was going back and forth. The
Yes.
comments that the defendant was making. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
So at this point, he was still talking about his country. He was like, at this point, he was showing. I can't remember which arm, but he was showing off a tattoo and claiming that he was a Viking, and so that became part of the rhetoric as well. Get out of the country. We kill Muslims. We chop their heads off. And now everybody is, well, not everybody, but a great number of people on the train are now like, just, man, shut up. Everybody's getting tired of the rhetoric. And so he's engaging with a bunch of people now, telling everybody to shut up, calling them punks and the B word. And, yeah. So it was just a lot of that. And so at this point, he's still talking about freedom of speech. So I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. You do have freedom of speech, So do I, so does every other citizen. I also have the freedom to ignore you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Because all I saw him doing was he continuously just gradually got louder and louder and louder, like he was amping himself up for something. And so at this point, I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm about to get off anyway. So I was like, all right, I'll let the security deal with it. So I said, I have the right to ignore you. And so I'm going to ignore you now. And so I started pushing the red button at that point when I told him I was going to ignore him. And I just started pushing the red button.
When you press that button, is there any response to a voice come on and say, okay, sir, we're on top of this, or did you get any response?
I can't remember if there was a response. I know I just kept pushing it. I do know that.
How many times do you think you pressed the button?
Oh, man, probably about like 20 times.
Okay.
I'm
You
not
don't
sure.
remember whether you got a response or not?
I don't remember. Because I was still like watching him and kind of engaging, but I was definitely ready for somebody to just come in and step in and just remove him from the train.
All right.
Yeah.
And because you were pressing the button, I'm sorry, okay. Why were you pressing the button?
Because I could see it escalating. I could see him just gradually getting louder and louder. And I know I've watched people in the past, amp themselves up for something. And that's what it seemed like he was doing. The do something didn't work, and it just seemed like he was amping himself up for something. I didn't know what it was. Like I said, didn't know what he had on him. I didn't know if he was just one of many people on the train that were ready to do something. All I know is that it just sounded like he was amping himself up. So at this time, I was like, all right, it's probably time to, get some security or somebody in here.
All right. What happened after that?
I remember turning around, like briefly, to the young ladies and mouthing to them, "Are you okay?" And they responded. One of them said, they mouthed back yes and thank you. And then so I nodded my head and I turned back around. I think at that point, it's been 2.5 years. So excuse me if everything is not clear, but I think that one of the gentlemen was coming from the back of the train, and he either sits down beside him or he comes beside him, and he has something on his phone, and he goes to, while the defendant is still spewing and arguing with people and calling them out, calling them different names and talking about he's a Viking and all this other stuff. He comes from the back and he shows him something on the other person's phone. He shows his phone to the defendant. And I just remember the defendant grabbing the phone and throwing it on the floor violently. And at that point, so, Micah the entire time had just been, standing on, just on the train, just relaxing. the girls appeared safe, for the most part, and the defendant was just talking. He was running his mouth, but he was talking, but he was amping himself up. Once the phone was thrown down, the gentleman, he jumped up, the defendant jumped up, and then I think we were in between stations. We were like on our way to Hollywood at that point, and so at that point they were about to engage. I think there was like some like bumping, and then they were starting to shove each other.
And by they, just so we're clear, by they.
Oh, the defendant and it was the gentleman who brought the phone. I believe he was one of the men who was killed. So, but yeah, they started kind of like bumping into each other and kind of getting ready to start shoving, and then Micah goes in, and I think at this point we're pulling in to Hollywood Station, like we're making our way in, we're starting to slow down, and Micah, when the defendant and the other gentleman start pushing each other in the center of the train, Micah kind of grabs the defendant and pushes him. He turns and then like kind of pushes him towards the door, closer to the closest door. And he says, "Get off!" Get the whatever he says. He, probably said some expletives or something like that. But he was basically like, "Get off the train." And so, he tries to, go back at Micah, and then Micah shoves him again, and he falls back closer to the door. And so, at that point, I remember the defendant saying to Micah, "Push me again." And Micah went to grab him and put him off the train. At this point, the doors are opening.
Push me again. What did you take that to mean?
I mean, that's, basically, he's going to respond. Anybody that, like at that point, I guess he hadn't responded, but I guess he was saying he was going to respond, if he pushed him again. So Michael went to grab him to.
Sorry, push me again. Is that a warning or a challenge?
No, that's definitely a challenge. I mean, he was definitely saying, like, if you do something, I'm going to do something back.
So Jeremy Christian said that,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No worries.
What did Michael Fletcher say? Or did you?
No, Micah didn't say anything. He just went to grab him and push him off the train, and it looked like the defendant threw a punch. I just remember it looking like he threw a punch, and so now I'm like, oh, okay, it's definitely escalated. This is probably what the defendant wanted, and
Objection and no to strike that, Your Honor.
What's your objection?
I'm sorry?
What's your objection?
Speculation about what was in his mind.
Okay. So I will grant that objection, and the jurors should disregard the last sentence.
sure. So at that point, like I said, he looked like he threw a punch, and so I'm thinking, it's going to be, just a fight, on the train, and Micah immediately drops, and he drops to a knee, and then he's like, "Help!" and he's grabbing his neck, and I just remember thinking, like, I've never seen, any punch do that to somebody, so I'm looking down at Micah, like, what happened, and I just remember. My vantage point, I could see him holding his neck, and I could see blood coming from between his fingers. And at that point, I don't know if people saw the drops, or I'm not sure what other people saw, but I just remember screaming, and then everybody just exiting the train as fast as they could.
And what did you do?
I stood there for a second. I didn't realize what was happening until, like, I saw him, Micah, just kind of like getting off, like screaming for help. And as he was getting off, I grabbed my bag and I got off as well. But I initially, I guess I thought once the defendant had stabbed Micah, that he was coming for me. So I was like, okay, I guess this is. What's about to happen. So I stood there for like a split second, but the defendant turned, because at this point he was probably like maybe 5 feet away from me, but he turns away from Micah, who was in between the defendant and me, and he goes towards the back. So I'm thinking he's just trying to get out the train and go somewhere else and run off. So I get off the train too. Micah's getting off the train, and people are starting to trying to render, some kind of aid to him because he's just bleeding from the neck. And I remember banging on the motorman's area, just saying, "Hey, somebody got stabbed. We need help." And the motorman had already said he was calling he had called it in.
This is the motorman.
For the train.
Brooklyn term, but this is
Oh.
the guy driving the Max.
Yes. I didn't even know that was a Brooklyn term. But yes, the person operating the train, I banged on the front and said that we need help. Somebody got stabbed, and he said he had already called it in. So,
And to be clear, when you left the Max train, or walked out of the Max train to alert the
I didn't
train
walk.
operator, you didn't walk.
No, I got off that train.
You got off that
Yeah,
train.
yeah.
Okay, meaning
Yeah,
you moved out.
I moved.
Okay. Did you see the defendant stab anyone else?
No, I didn't. I honestly thought I thought he was coming for me after he had when I realized he had stabbed Micah. I thought the next, I thought the next move was going to be me. He had engaged with me so long. I thought that I was going to be the next one. But when he turned, I thought he was just trying to get off the train. I literally thought he was just trying to exit the train and run off somewhere. And so, I didn't know that. I didn't know what he was doing after that.
All right. Sir, let me show you what's been marked previously as State's Exhibit 52 and State's 44.
I'll ask if you recognize what's in these pictures.
Yes, that is the defendant coming towards me. He is exiting the train and yelling, "Anybody else want some?" And he's coming towards me with the knife in hand.
And that's State's 52 and then State's 44.
That is him still, that is me coming to his right, to my left, stepping away from him, and he is still pointing the knife at me. I thought again we were going to engage, but I guess he was just clearing his path to the stairs.
All right, Your Honor, the State will offer 52 and 44.
No objection.
Okay, 52 and 44 are admitted.
So State's 52 is the first in the sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And is that you, Mr. Forde, on the right, in the white shirt?
That is me.
Were you surprised when you saw Jeremy Christian there?
I was, because like I said, I thought that he had run to the back to exit the train and I don't know, run down the tracks. I didn't know what he was doing, but I just thought he was running that way to exit the train. So I was surprised to see him coming out.
And did you clearly see the knife in his hand?
Oh, yes, I did.
And do you remember what Jeremy Christian said?
He said, "Anybody else want some?"
And what did you take that to mean?
I only thought he was talking about Micah at the point because I didn't see him stab the other people. But I just thought he wanted anybody else want to get stabbed,
And there's a metal post or pole, it looks like, in between you and him in that picture.
Yes.
That's on the train platform itself, I think, with some signs or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then in States 44, which is a second or two later, I believe, is still from the video. Is that you on the far right, sir?
That is correct. That is me.
And so in this picture, has the defendant circled around that metal post?
Yes, he has.
And what are you doing?
I'm getting out of the way and preparing. I honestly thought that when he didn't do it in the train, I thought that he had run off. But when he came back, I thought he was ready to engage at this point. So I'm going to his right, my left, because the knife is in his right hand. So, but I'm preparing. But if I go to his right, he has a better I guess, advantage.
Well, so you're a big guy,
Yes.
and you're a tough guy, and you're a Marine.
I'm not a tough guy.
You're not a tough guy. Well, okay, tougher than some. But, sir, at that moment, did you believe that the defendant was going to stick that knife into you?
I believed he was going to try, yes.
What happened after that?
When I stepped over closer to the train, and he kind of kept pointing it, he had obviously cleared his path, but he had cleared a path for the stairs, which was right at that point to my right and to his left.
There's
And
a
so-
steep flight of stairs.
Yes, and so he just went straight for the steps and then went up the steps.
Did you ever see, after the stabbing of Michael Fletcher, did you ever see Walio, Mohamed, and Destinee Mangum on the mast or on the platform?
I did not. I think a number of people went straight for the steps.
And then, what did you do after the defendant ran up that flight of stairs?
I stayed with the other people. I was focused on Micah because he had stabbed him in the neck. So I know that there were pretty vital arteries, up there. So I'm assuming he's bleeding out. He only has minutes. So I was watching other people just remove shirts. I guess if they hadn't, I would have. But at this point, I guess I'm hearing people coming from the back of the train saying that other people have been stabbed, and we're all waiting. He's the operator of the train is saying that police and paramedics are on the way, and so there are a great number of people who are just waiting, trying to render aid to the other two gentlemen who ended up succumbing, and Micah, and that's all I remember. It's
All
just.
right. And so you remained on the platform until the paramedics and the police arrived, it sounds like.
Yes, I did.
And you became aware at some point that there were two other persons stabbed inside the MAX train, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Forde. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
And cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Forde.
Good afternoon.
I want to follow up on just a couple of things, and then I think I'm going to show you a whole series of photos. I'll have you look at them, and then maybe we'll talk about them. But one of the things I want to follow up on is you said a number of times that Mr. Christian was saying Christians kill Muslims and things like that.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that seemed to have been, from what I take you were saying, kind of a theme for him.
Yeah, among other things, yes.
Okay, yeah, other things as well. I mean, one of the big themes was free speech, right?
Vikings, free speech, get out of my country. We cut off people's heads, we slice throats.
And when you say we, is what you're saying that Mr. Christian was saying Christians cut off people's heads?
I would assume, that'd be a better question for the defendant, but
Well, I'm asking your interpretation because you were saying Mr. Christian was saying we cut off people's heads, or was he saying Christians cut off people's heads?
no, he started off by saying Christians kill Muslims, and then he began with the we. He began associating himself with whoever he meant kills Muslims and chops off their heads and slices their throats.
So you were taking it that he was identifying himself as one of those people.
I think it was pretty clear. If he says we, he's involving himself in whomever takes part in whatever action he's discussing.
Okay. He mentioned Saudi Arabia.
I don't remember Saudi Arabia being mentioned.
Okay. Do you
It's been
remember?
2.5 years, but
I'm sorry?
it's been 2.5 years, but I don't remember every
Of course not.
minor detail.
Oops, of course not. Was that from me?
That's actually just where the microphone plugs in, so
Oh.
it might want to be obviously not in the best shape.
Do you remember him mentioning any other countries?
No, I just remember him saying, "Get out of this country."
And now I'm going to jump forward a bit to on the platform. You were just asked some questions about what happened on the platform. You described that.
Sure.
So is it safe to say, your recollection, he never touched you on the platform?
No.
There was no physical contact with you actually at any time, is that right?
No.
So he didn't slam you into the MAX train or anything like this?
No. He just pointed a knife at me and came my way.
Well, you'd certainly remember if he slammed you into the MAX train, right?
I think we would have tussled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. What I've done is- Okay, so, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yeah.
I'm going to show you a number of photos. They've been marked, oh, my glasses. Defense Exhibit 120 through 137, it looks like. So just take a look at those, just kind of flip through them to see if you recognize mainly yourself, but then others in them as well. And I'll ask you questions about this.
Okay. You want me to go through all of them?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You're almost there.
Yeah, I'm almost there. Okay.
Did you take a look at all those?
I did.
Did you see yourself in each of these photos?
I did.
Okay. So I'm going to come back here and see if we can come down to the view of them. And I guess what I do first is offer into evidence defendants' exhibits 120 through 137.
There's no objection.
Okay. So let's start with defendants' exhibit 120. It's a little bit hard to see on here, but this is, you can see there's a timestamp on there that may help you identify what's happening at a particular moment. But we've got 4:27:06 p.m. Do you see that on there? So is that, I guess it's hard for you to see.
Yeah, I can see it.
Can you see it okay?
I see that part. Yes.
You know, if you wanted to come down, that'd be fine if you can see it better. I mean, if it's okay with others, or whatever works best for you.
It's fine either way.
You okay?
Yeah,
If
come
you
down.
see it there, that's fine.
Okay.
So do you see the timestamp that I mentioned?
I do. I do.
There's something else you may notice, the 0.0 miles per hour down at the very bottom, which would indicate the train is not moving at that point.
Okay.
Okay? And you see yourself peeking out there towards the aisle. Looks like you're peeking out towards Mr. Christian. Does that seem right to you?
I can't see where I am. Am I in the back at this point?
You know what? It might be better if you
Yeah.
give that a try. If it works out for you, then
Yeah.
go with that.
That's fine.
So maybe come on, and we want to be, so the jurors can see past you. No, that's okay. Step forward here. They got two screens, but so you can see maybe yourself right there.
Oh, yeah.
So you're peeking out there, is that right?
Yes.
And this is, I take it while you're listening and hearing and becoming concerned about what the things that Mr. Christian is saying.
Yes.
And this is a moment when you're deciding, I think I'm going to step forward and draw attention to myself instead of allow Mr. Christian to focus on the teams that are seated there. Is that right?
Seems about right, yes.
Okay. So let's go then to next one, and you can see the timestamp again, still 00 miles per hour. So is your understanding then this is where you kind of came forward, took a position to draw attention to yourself at that moment?
Yes.
Okay. Move forward. This is just a little bit forward. You're still staying in the same position. I take it at this point you're engaging Mr. Christian, is that right?
I am, yes.
Train still stopped. It's the Lloyd station, right?
I'm not sure very well, yeah.
And Mr. Christian at this point now, he's engaging with you, right?
Oh, yeah.
So in other words, your intention to engage him and take focus upon yourself is actually working. That's what's happening here?
Yes, it has.
Okay. A few moments later, you notice trains just moving here. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
You can
have
see
5.7
that.
miles per hour.
And you can see the teams there to the side of you. And can you tell where they're looking at this point?
They're looking to the other part of the train.
Okay. So up, and I take the other part, you mean like to the front part of the train?
Yes,
The-
away from the defendant.
Away from Mr. Christian?
Yes.
Gotcha. What's happening here? Can you tell? First off, maybe we can identify. Who is that you recognize with the T-shirt with the red circle and the two white dots?
That looks like Micah.
Okay. And the two teams are still seated where they are there?
Yes.
So up to this point, they haven't gotten up and moved?
No.
Okay. What's happening here? Does it get a little focus? Initially, it was focusing as well. So what do you see happening here?
This is Micah engaging with the defendant, telling him, you don't talk to young ladies up there.
Okay. And what are the young ladies doing? Can you tell her?
They're getting up and moving.
I'm sorry?
They're getting up and moving to the back.
And how about you? What are you doing at this point? Are you still engaging with Mr. Christian, or are you disengaged at this moment?
No, I'm still engaging. And Michael was just joining in.
Okay. So you're both engaging Mr. Christian at the same time here?
That is correct.
Okay. Here I notice you have your hand on Micah Fletcher's shoulder, is that correct?
Sure.
And what was that for?
Well, if I could go back real quick to the,
Sure.
the last picture.
Yeah.
The last picture,
Let me just,
I'm fairly certain
okay.
that they got, the young ladies got up when the defendant stood up and said, do
Okay.
something.
Okay.
And this is probably when do something came up.
Right at this moment, when Mr. Fletcher's there?
Somewhere in here, because that's when I remember not seeing them after that.
Okay. So it's kind of happening simultaneously. As Mr. Fletcher comes forward, he's got his finger pointing, he's saying things to Mr. Christian. Two teams are leaving, and Mr. Christian stands up at that point. Is that right?
It might have happened right before Micah comes down. Because I know the do something was directed at me.
It was.
Yes.
Okay, but it happened right about this time, is that?
Probably, as Micah was probably coming down. Probably.
As he was coming in? Okay. So now I'll go back, I'll take that photo away and go back to this one. And your hand is on Mr. Fletcher's shoulder at this point. What was the purpose of that?
All I'm telling Micah is that, he's just talking. It's cool, he's just talking.
So you later were asked questions about this from law enforcement, right?
Yes.
And that's basically what you told them, right?
And exactly what
I think you said when the young fellow came down, you were saying to him, hey, he's just talking, we don't need to fight, no need to fight, right?
No, I didn't say no need to fight. I never said that.
Didn't say that?
Yeah, I just said he's just talking. It's cool. He's just talking. Even though he was standing up, saying do something, trying to make people into a fight.
Right.
I was like, he's just talking.
Okay. So you were, I noticed, keeping your space and distance from him.
From who?
From Mr. Christian. Well, you weren't moving.
I'm not sure. I came closer to him.
You
so I don't
did.
understand that.
Okay, well, next one. So you came closer to him, but you didn't come close in an aggressive way or get like in his face or anything like that. We can see the position you took up there.
No, I mean,
So that's what I mean.
well, the point was not to engage with the defendant. The point was to, get him to redirect his, all of his ire and
His focus.
all of his, or everything he was spewing, all of the violence he was spewing at me,
Yeah.
and
So,
not the young ladies.
so when you said the point wasn't to engage him, you previously have been talking about you did engage him, but I think what you mean is the point was to engage him verbally, not physically. Is that right?
And take his attention away from the young ladies.
Yeah, and so you didn't want to become some sort of physical threat or, kind of invite some sort of physical confrontation with him, right?
No, I mean, no. I was not. I did want him to stop threatening the young ladies.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a 40-year-old man, you got a family, and you didn't see the point of who's tougher, that sort of thing, right? That wasn't interesting to you.
That's never the point, but sometimes people want to find out.
Right.
Yeah.
You weren't interested.
I mean, I wasn't interested in that initially, no. I mean, but if he would have come into my space, yeah, maybe.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But the point being, he didn't come into your space, right?
No, I didn't.
And you didn't get into his space.
I didn't think he would, no.
No. And so you guys just kept the distance from each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we move along here. You said, I think, something like you pushed the button perhaps 20 times.
Yeah.
Oh, I went to the wrong one. I don't want to go there. Sorry. That's it. I need to pull from the bottom. Well, actually, this is when you pushed the button too. That's why I got confused. So this may have been the first time you pushed the button, but you did push the button a whole bunch of times, right?
I did.
It may have been 20, it may have been a dozen, who knows, right?
Something like
But that was something you were continually doing, pushing the button, which I take it means you wanted to get the attention of the conductor, the motivator,
Yeah.
right?
Sure. The operator.
Well, and others have testified that the operator came over the loudspeaker, but I think you don't remember quite that.
I don't remember now, because I was engaged with the defendant.
Okay. So, let's move on. This one here, train's moving faster, we're moving forward, it's 4:28, 46 seconds. Do you recall what was going on with you at this moment? It looks like you may be engaging Mr. Fletcher, but I'm not sure. Do you recall?
Yeah, I think, I'm in between just talking to Father Micah and still engaging with the defendant. He's still saying stuff, but everything's directed at me and other people. I think at this point, he's yelling at a bunch of people, and I'm kind of just laughing like, you all over the place now. I don't even know what you're talking about. And I'm still just hitting the button.
Okay.
And I think I'm close to telling him that he has the freedom of speech and I have the freedom to ignore him. I'm getting close to that point. If I haven't already said it.
Yeah, and you also said, hey, I think I have more rights to this country than you serve the country and so forth. So somewhere along the way you say that.
Yeah, it's
here too, right?
It's a whole lot of dialogue going on here.
Okay. Another time you're pushing the button and we're just kind of moving. Oops, I'm going from the wrong side. I keep wanting to do that. So we're moving forward. I guess again, it looks like you're engaging Mr. Christian here. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And at this point, well, you can see Mike is not engaging.
Right. He turned back, right? I mean, totally ignoring Mr. Christian. How much time passed before Mr. Fletcher shifted his focus, stopped engaging with Mr. Christian, and was kind of like staying in that area, in that vicinity.
It was pretty quick. He said what he had to say to him about, not talking to young ladies that way.
Okay.
And that was it.
Okay. There again, you're pushing the button. And just kind of representative a number of times. Here you're kind of pointing at yourself. It's a little bit later, and maybe this is where you're saying something about you, your rights to the country, that sort of thing, maybe?
It's very possible.
Very possible. Kind of looks like that maybe the gesture you'd be making if you were doing it. I know, there's a number of moments where you've got the smile in your face, and I take it that that's just a way to try to not engage in some aggressive way, which is show that you're not really into that or interested in that.
No, I mean,
What's that about?
No, I mean, like I said, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, not Portland, Oregon. So, this type of encounter was not something that I had never seen or experienced before. The difference is, I don't know. I think at this point, just listening to what he was spewing, I was just like, all right, I'm done talking to you. Like, you just...
You're kind of talking like crazy now.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't really crazy. It was just like I was just done listening, and I think at this point I was probably looking at where we were, and I was like, okay, I'm real close to getting off. I'm just going to disengage, but I hope that security is at the next station or something.
Do you have training in how to de-escalate a situation? I don't know
I'm
if
sure somewhere in my 18 plus years in the military.
In the military, maybe you had some.
Yeah.
But you're also, I think, telling us just kind of life experience and being where you've been. You've learned how to let these things just kind of go past without escalating it into a physical confrontation. Is that fair to say? Or
No, I just think more life experiences taught me that encounters like this can end badly. And so, just kind of gauging what he was doing. He wasn't doing anything outside of his little space in the seat. And so I was like, all right, cool. As long as he's not doing anything, nobody else has to do anything. Or at least I don't have to do it. I wasn't going to talk to anybody.
And it seems like that's kind of the way it went up until the time the gentleman came and sat next to him and they had the cell phone incident. Would you say that that's kind of the way it was?
He had been engaging with other people, but like I said, from the moment he started threatening the young ladies, he gradually got louder and louder and louder. So he was amping himself up for something.
So I guess-
know what it was.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, nobody was getting into his space. There was no physical confrontation, and as long as it was just verbal, like you said, he's just talking.
Yeah. I mean, what he was saying initially was pretty. I mean, you don't just conversation just doesn't happen like, hey, we cut people's heads off, in Portland, Oregon. That's what we do.
No,
It's just not a conversation that people want to have.
Right. So they all tell him to shut up.
I think at this point, yeah, people were tired of hearing. Like, it wasn't just us. It was pretty much the entire train was tired.
So it's safe to say what he was saying was offensive, it was obnoxious, so on and so forth.
It was violent. It was threatening.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It was more than that. It was
All
more
right.
than just offensive.
Let me show you another one. Moving forward, I guess. Kind of like the others, but maybe nothing new there. So, this one 431. Anything different here in your mind that's happening, or is it kind of just the status quo? What's been established here?
I just think it's more, just more of the same. He still speaks about it being his country and people can leave and he's got freedom of speech and call people N-word and punks and all this other stuff. Yeah.
Almost done with these. Now this one, there's audio on some of the videos because people were using their cell phones, and I'm thinking this is the time you got your hand up and you're kind of waving it around, and I think you're saying to him, you're just talking crazy now, going all over, you're all over the place, something like that. Do you remember that?
I was doing almost like a figure eight. You're
Oh.
all over the place. You're just, yeah.
Okay. And I think it was right about then when you told him, I'm going to just ignore it. Is that
Yeah.
your recollection?
He has freedom of speech. I have the freedom to, and I'm going to operate. I'm going to use my right to.
All right. You notice on this one, the miles per hour is down to 6.9, so the train is slowing down coming to the station. And we're at 4:31:40 p.m. So does that seem right to you? That depicts what's happening at that moment?
Yeah.
Okay. And now, the one I kept wanting to show you, this is you're pushing the button. The last photo to show you here, 0 miles per hour, and you can see it's 4:31:52. So this is after Mr. Namkai-Meche has sat down, the cell phone's been smacked to the floor, and you're pushing the button here before you get off the train. Is that right?
That's correct.
I think that's the last photo I'm going to show you, so you can go ahead and take your seat again if you like. There's, okay. I'm sorry, just bear with me a moment. On May 28th, you were interviewed by Detective Michael. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah, I
That's
do.
a long time ago, so I'm quite sure you don't remember exactly what you said at that point for the most part. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I guess it would be fair to say.
So I had asked you some questions about Muslims, Christians killing Muslims and so forth. Do you remember exactly what you told Detective Michaels about that?
Not exactly, but I can paraphrase.
So let me, if I may approach you, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'll show you here on page 8 at the very top. If you could just read, I kind of highlighted it there.
Okay.
Does that help? No, I'm sorry. Just
Oh.
read it yourself.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And then I'll ask a question, okay?
No worries.
Your Honor, this is the same objection as previously. It's not clear to me how the evidence code allows, which I'm not even sure what this really is supposed to be. It's not refreshing recollection, it's not impeachment, it's what it really is trying to get someone to say something that
Well,
the
the
attorney
question
wants.
the kind of question presented. Yeah. So you were approaching and you were going to ask a question. So what's your question?
Sure. So I think I established he doesn't have a perfect recollection of what he said to Detective Michaels 2.5 years ago, so I have given him this so he can take a look at it and refresh his recollection.
Yes.
And then I wish to ask him a question about what he said.
And as I understand the rule, before that happens, the party has to ask whether the memory is refreshed. And then it either is refreshed or it's not refreshed.
You're correct. So you should ask that question.
Well, I just didn't get that for you because he just got it. So I'll give him a chance to look at it. Have you had a chance to look at it? All right. Does that help refresh your recollection about what you told Detective Michaels?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So if I could enter that. Thank you. Do you now recall you said to Detective Michaels, Christians, we kill Muslims. And he just kept saying things like that? Is that what you told Detective Michaels?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty close.
I believe you already said this, but just to make sure, he never used the N-word that you recall. Is that right?
No.
Okay. There's one more part I want to address, and I didn't find it, so I'm going to look for it one more time. Okay, here it is. Okay. Now, I asked you if you recalled saying to Mr. Fletcher that we don't need to fight him, and you didn't recall that. Is that correct?
No.
Do you recall what you told Detective Michaels about that?
Not verbatim.
Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'll just hand this to you and just read it to yourself. And that's that part there at all. And then I'll ask you a question when you get a chance to review it. Does that help refresh your recollection of what you told Detective Michaels?
It does.
Okay. And so, is it correct then that you told Detective Michaels what you said to Mr. Fletcher, that Mr. Christian's just talking, no need to fight him over that. He's just talking, so we don't need to fight over it. Is that correct?
Something along those lines, yeah.
Well, I think I read it verbatim. Do you want to take another look?
I mean,
Do you dispute anything? Did I read it correctly? Let's put it that way.
yeah, we don't need to fight over it.
That looks right then?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
And redirect?
Yeah.
Mr. Forde, I just have a few follow-up questions
Please.
raised by the defense attorney. In terms of pushing the button
Yes.
to call for some kind of assistance, how long was it before any police officers or anyone else in charge showed up at the transit station?
It was a long time. It was probably maybe a half hour, 45 minutes. It felt like an hour. It was a long time.
I take it there were no security agents or fare inspectors or police officers aboard that Max?
No, unfortunately, no.
In a couple of those still frames that the defense just showed, which are still frames taken from a video,
Right.
you can see your pearly white teeth. So
Yes.
your mouth's open. I think the defense would suggest that you were smiling. But did you find the situation with the defendant amusing, his speech? Did you find it amusing, or did you find it to be racist? Well, the
You're
question
presenting
is,
a choice, so it is leading technically all of us.
well, so it's not legal. How did you find the defendant's rant?
The rant was violent. The rant was it was coded racism. You know, so terms like Viking, terms like go back, get out of my country, terms like freedom of speech, which is not freedom for everybody. You know, that freedom of speech is not freedom to black passing people. So all of like those terms and more were, you know, that is, you know, definitely coded language for white supremacist talk or racist talk.
That's how you took it?
I think that's definitely how I took it, yes.
Were you surprised that Michael Fletcher moved up after the defendant threw the other man's phone to the floor of the MAX train?
Yes, I was surprised by everything. You know, at that point, I was hoping that everybody could just kind of get to their destination safely. Once the phone was thrown down, I knew it was going to escalate. Or I believed it was going to escalate. I didn't know. I believed.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Forde.